I'm going to give this a shot. Oh boy. Hey, good morning, Adrian Crusher. Maybe it's something more elaborate than that. Crusher. Crusher. It's not Crusher, it's Crusher. I guess I'm in a bit of a mood this morning. Kind of irritated by the lack of attention paid. I don't know. I'm not really sure if that's the right way to say it, but so we had a lot of back and forth going on because of that filing that happened in the Discord, and I'm not really sure. Um, this is a lot of data. Milk duds. Duds. I was thinking about how fireworks are. I just think about how fireworks sometimes are duds. You just ask if you want to get in. So you want to message me. A lot of people don't seem to know how to do that. If it doesn't work out, then the reason I do that is because when I used to post the link, and we would get like a lot of people who were just kind of there to post garbage. So adding the extra step has made it a little bit more difficult, but as a result, people have not been swarming it, and they don't get the you have to go through the I'm gonna link you to a page that has rules, and rules are rules. I mean, it is what it is. The reason that they're there isn't to censor people or be really, it's just protection for everybody, like user wise, and having a safe place to do your TA stuff and share ideas and data, but also because the those kinds of groups get really dumb really quickly. It starts just turning into a bunch of people either complaining about stuff, which has happened in our group once, or just ragging on other people. Like, I'm not a big fan of that. It doesn't matter if you like somebody or not. Like, there's not really any need for that. And then also just all kinds of other stuff like that, can become kind of like a dude club or whatever. I do my best to try to help mitigate that, but by having a set of rules, then I have something that can hold people accountable. So you just have to check the rule box, and then you can join the channels. B-Dog, yeah, we can check it out. So that just lets me say, hey, you check the channels. If you then go against the rules and start doing stuff that's inappropriate or whatever, then I have cause to just say, all right, you're out. Right? Because you had to check the rules in order to come in. And the main goal, of course, is just, again, keep a professional type environment. So if you wouldn't do it in the office place, I don't think you should do it in the Discord group. So, and it, for the most part, has worked. I got to admit that I get a little bit overzealous maybe at times. And so every now and again, I kind of rule the chat a little too much. Not in like a mean way, just I'm posting a lot of information. So when I first started it, really wanted it to be a I guess similar to a previous one where you had different people doing different TA, but there wasn't really much interest in that coming from the other group, so I don't know. It's mostly just me. I mean, there's a couple other people, like Kotero does a lot. There's a lot of really good information that people post in the GME chat. And then, we get people like that are like there's somebody that posted the filing, which is really great, really helpful. Just highlights on that and stuff like that so you can see it. I like it as a written word and having images and stuff just to kind of go back to. I was saying I was a little bit not hot-headed about it, but I was a little bit like, okay, why are we somehow like surprised that the language in this filing is talking about being between like 150 and 250, I don't find that particularly surprising, and we had talked about 150 to 250 for a really long time, like most of the year. So it was just kind of odd to me. I thought that was really strange. It's like, I guess my thought is that most people probably when I say things are just thinking about like the next upside, but they're not thinking about what happens after that. And I try to be really clear, like I'm not bullish when I'm talking about going here or going here, like those are not bullish moves. They're really not. They may seem that way because it seems like an advancement, but the only way to know that that's bullish is to have that retest and then advance again. And everything else beyond that, this would just be a signal for distribution. And that's kind of where I've been at for a long time. And I was not trying to be like salty about it, but someone was like, why do you think it's going to go to 237? Well, this is why, but I mean, I did this on the stream, and I know that not everybody watches it, so like it's not inappropriate. It's totally reasonable. Somebody could be like, hey, well, why do you think that? I mean, it's just a technical target for dropping below the floor. Beyond that, I think there's a lot of reason to suspect this still could go down to like these, 180 levels. And we had talked about 180 a long time ago. A couple other people had actually mentioned it too. I'm not the only one that came up with that number. I came up with it in weird ways. Other people mentioned it even before me. I think that 180 to 190 area is legit. And I'm probably not the first person to find it. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that it's a really legitimate level. When we talk about lows, there's one commonality, and that is the range that it's in. So by far, almost every single one of our targets, I mean, we look at all the targets that I've gotten for lows, they're right here. There's not that much variation. You're talking about like 180 to 240. It's not that complicated. Now, the filing says that at minimum it could be 150. I don't really know where that comes from, but I went back and I was like, I do think that I've seen that number before, and so I went back to look, and I did come up with that number before. There was a chart that I did back in March. I'm going to put it on the screen right now. Now the timing here is off because originally we were thinking that squeeze might actually happen earlier, and it was around this time in March that I started changing my mind quite a bit about timing again, because we had done a couple different models and we came up with something that was, all right, so basically what I found was that this might be actually like a middle. That peak that we had back in December could be representative of kind of middle of the overall schematic, which is quite long then. And then it doesn't actually leave until August. That's significantly different than what's on this chart from March, but the idea here was correct. And we also found that the problem with this was that what we had seen as like a likelihood of coming up to 4, again, even at that time, like it's not happening. It was already in a distribution here. You could see it was going down. It was kind of targeting low. Those markers as they were set up, again, may have been genuine. And I know that sounds a little bit like a cop-out. Like you're just wrong, you're wrong, right? Later, as this developed more and we started looking at the local setup right here, it was really right around earnings that I think a lot of that started to shift. This is where that happened. We talked about that yesterday on the stream. So from earnings through about the end of March, really going into April, where you have the first tariff deadline, or the first tariff thing, that Liberation Day thing, this particular area, we just talked about it yesterday. There seems to have been a pretty simple, straightforward explanation for a lot of the movement here that then is sort of lost in this time period where you have this kind of slowdown and a lesser desire to maybe go way up, especially on balance. And I was thinking about it yesterday just because we had to look at it. I don't know, I was looking at it and I was like wondering if that shift that took place, and it might still be on the chart right here. Let me take a look real quick. If that shift that took place was in this time period right here, because there was a secondary motion down that sets up like a new trajectory, which up until this point I wouldn't say assumed, but I had thought this was going to double up, like go up and then up again to the highs, because I was using 2020. So yesterday we looked at this and we were like, oh, this seems different. There was a setup, it doesn't seem to go as low either, which is sort of something important, because if this only goes this high and it doesn't go as low, then it makes sense as a double down. It doesn't make sense if it's supposed to go this high and then go super low still, like way down here. It's like, where's that going to come from, without dilution? Well, there's this new exchangeable notes thing that they're talking about, and has to have shareholder approval, I suppose. I don't know if they're going to do it at August or what the deal is. Not sure when that's supposed to happen. I didn't read the whole thing, so I'd have to read the whole thing. But for the next shareholder meeting, or if it's like now, I don't know. But that news dropped the stock like 10% the other day, and again, I don't know if it's happening right this second or not, but none of it looks like it's concrete. It demands shareholder approval. There's a lot of silly little things in there that we could talk about. I read through that page and there's just so much. There's so many prepositions like if then, statements. It's like basically what they're saying is they're trying to like circumnavigate what Adam Aaron said, which was, it's pretty silly to me. Because he had expressed explicitly that he wasn't going to do any more offerings. And it's almost like they're saying, but, maybe with shareholder approval, or we're not going to do any offerings without shareholder approval. Maybe that was the idea. So it looks like a deal, but then you read the fine print and you realize that they're basically giving themselves another way to dilute, essentially. And it's not even that much. It's like after it gets over 200% of the call, the fake call thing, then they can just dilute as much as they want. Like, that's basically what it says. And it's complicated because essentially what they were saying in this notification, this stuff, is that if it goes down to, let's say, like 150, this person has the option to then buy the shares to convert it, I guess, the notes into shares, which is not unusual. That's normal. To take that as an option, they can do that. Sorry, keep clicking the wrong thing. But they were saying like the value between no lower than like 150 and no higher than like 275 or something, or 250. I don't know. I think it was 275. So this whole area right here. So they have all this stuff that could happen in this area. And part of me like wonders if that's where that's coming from. Like, I don't know how they did it, but it's almost like the operators, maybe they already knew. Keep doing the wrong thing. Maybe they already knew. And I was talking about it yesterday. Like, I don't know how you're going to get it down. It's not moving. The on-balance volume is like sitting there. And what happened in 2020 was there was another offering that happened after that massive peak. So very strange to think about it now, as I'm like, are they aware that this is probably going to happen? Is that how they're going to use this to drop the stock price? You know, with, I don't know, convertible notes, new exchangeable notes, whatever. They're trying to call it different things. I think it's just to confuse people. To me, it sounds like the same thing, like as always, because you're basically just doing an offering. And I think there's a sense of, again, ambiguity to it because they don't want you to necessarily understand it, which really bothers me. And I'm not saying that they couldn't come out and explain it more clearly, but I don't think I'm like a not well-read person. I feel like I read enough and I'm pretty fluent. And there's so many prepositional phrases in this that it's like you have to read it like 3 different ways, 3 different times to understand every sentence. So basically, we can go through that if you want, but basically what I was saying is that I'm not really sure where there's a surprise, though, because if we had looked at this kind of stuff before and found that 150s was even possible, and really look at the range here, it's between 240 and 150. And then I did another chart right after that. This is the same day. This is on March 28th. And we talked about if this doesn't go up, it could go down to 240 first, near 240 first. Now, I had it going into a spring. That later changed, and I said I don't think it's going to go into a spring. But I said probably going to go down first, and then we would have a push up to 4. That's actually what happened. It went to near 240s and then push up to 4. None of this timing-wise is correct, by the way. Again, everything was delayed quite a bit. And we found that as we went along that nothing was really moving at pace. So, I don't know. To me, it's like for the past 6 months, ever since December and that fallout, I don't really feel like it's been that confusing. Like, my timing's never been perfect, for sure. And I would never say that it has been. That would be really disingenuous. But the idea here of like coming back up to 4, this has been in my brain since, February when we finally hit this low. And then we kept going down and iterating until it changed character. And that's when it was like, finally, we're going to go up there. And we did. But the plot has never sort of changed. It's like you can go to here, you go to here. It doesn't really matter. Afterwards, you're probably going to come down. And that all goes back to this area. I mean, that goes back to the beginning of this setup. This is an SOW right here. After this like really strong kind of stopping point, there's another weakness that's made. And that solidifies to some degree because it doesn't rebound, especially right here in July. In my opinion, that was about the only place this could have happened. Once that didn't happen, you're really just looking for a UTAD. And that's what I was looking for this whole time, and it took forever, you know. And every single time we got to like another iterative cat ear, I was like, well, could happen. It didn't happen, right? So overall, like we did have it, but it was way later. And that was about the time when we were coming down here where I started looking at the timing a little differently and suggesting that this could take quite a long time. This could take until that earnings. This is essentially like exactly halfway. So this would signify a potential middle. It took a really long time. And this is when we start looking at, you know, it may not be a January or a June run at all. And I was saying that while some pretty prominent people were still saying it was going to be May, June, I had shifted away from that idea. And I'll just leave it at that. I think you know who those people were that were saying it was going to squeeze then. I mean, I was saying like, I don't know, you know, really starting to look more like August. So I haven't changed from that. Now, I know that there's it's awfully easy to just kind of kick the can down the road. Oh, we get to August and it doesn't run, then what? Well, I don't know. You know, if it goes to August and doesn't run, I don't have anything else. Like September 6th is kind of the latest because it's this drop-in area. But even that, I'm like, that's pretty late. You know, that'd be a weird run. And it's just a weird time of the year to do that. Yeah, I mean, and beyond that, what do you got? February 2026, you know, that's the only other date I've really found. So I'm of the opinion that this whole offering thing, this exchangeable notes thing, as they're calling it, really isn't, I don't think it's anything like new or surprising. I think it could have been at a different time that it was announced, but maybe that's part of the reason this volume was just garbage, is that there was an expectation that something was coming. I don't, again, know how exactly, but just kind of waiting for bad news, an excuse to really drop it harder through certain levels. So you get the weaknesses, and then you just wait for the news. And you know, we saw some of that stuff written on the wall, but it wasn't obvious, to me anyways, that it was definitely going to do what it did. It was more of, okay, that really failed to advance there. So when I'm talking about 333, I still think this is very possible, and it would be a hook. So you have to understand, like, that's not a bullish price action. That's like a hook, because at this point, it's come so far down that the reaction wouldn't take you back above necessarily 333, which means that it wouldn't come back above this creek. So basically, if it gets up there 315 to 333, I think it's probably done. Unfortunately, had it broken out here at 315, I think you would be talking about laying up on top of the creek. Again, could still have been distribution. I had it marked off that way, but you'd have I think an equally possible chance that it goes up again. Again, a UTAD kind of motion, not anything positive. You might say, well, that's too high, but it's not. We've done this before frequently on AMC, where the second move comes up above the first after a pretty decent sell down. You know, this is an example of one right here, but there's frequent examples of that. Here's another one right here where it came way above the top. This one went up 3 times above the top, and it's all distributive, you know. So it's certainly like a precedence for it. It's not like out of nowhere that I'm saying like that could happen. And so then there's people who are saying like, well, that'll never happen. I'm like, I mean, it happens quite a bit, where the second motion after a deeper pullback does come up higher. It did it right here too. And then you go into like the actual like cat ear slump period. And if you look at it that way, these are all pretty much the same. Like this is a higher push, and then it comes into like a slump period. And then same thing here. This is like a higher push, and then it goes into like a slump period. They're really no different. They're just one's bigger than the other, one's higher than the other here, blah, 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 blah. But they pretty much are the same rhyming motion. So for me, it was like, we're looking at this. I'm not thinking that this is, people would say, well, that was irrational. It's not going to do that. I'm like, I mean, it's done quite a bit. Like, we've had a lot of instances where that second push would come over the top and then sell down. It's very common, very, very common on AMC. What maybe not be common would be, again, this coming as low as it did. It's still in a retracement. I think we mentioned yesterday, this is a 786 and an 854, depending on where you measure from. Measuring from the second move here to the top, this is sitting on the 786. All the way, it's still like got a little more room down to the 786 to 275. So I'm looking at it like I did yesterday. I'm still thinking this is probable. I'm kind of bummed that it didn't happen this week for the sake of my calls, because I had some for this week and just burned up. That's life. I held on too long, I guess. Didn't roll them out early enough. But I was pretty confident I was going to at least try. Now we've got this issue where it's come down so far that the drop-in doesn't get you over the top. So we may not have enough momentum to pump all the way up. And we could still get to like 350, but my guess is that we're probably going to stop at 333, this area, and distribute. I don't think we're going to go beyond it at this time. Again, happy to be wrong. It's just that the way this set up, it really set up more like an S-curve. So we're really going to be in the best situation if we get a hook, frankly, which isn't exactly comforting. Timing, who knows? I've got it going up pretty early into next week, maybe with the tariff deadline. But anyways, so this filing, this idea of like, oh, it got to be between 275 and 150 in order for these people to exchange these notes for shares. I'm just kind of like, whatever, that's my thought. It's like, whatever. It just does not really matter. The previous creek, the one that we just jumped over in all this iterative nonsense, it intersects earnings around 180s. So this and then again, looking back at like what we found in March, those setups were pointing towards like 150s. I'm optimistic about it. I don't necessarily think it has to go that low. We'll see. Honestly, I think it's more likely to go that low if this pumps up again. If it pumps all the way up and somehow it hits like 460, I think it's possible it goes that low. I do. I think it's more likely it goes down that low if it goes higher at this point, which sounds weird, but that is my thought, because I think you'd have to have some kind of massive upthrust. I think until then, I'm really just looking for I guess we can call it like a slump of sorts here, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyways, so I was a little bit maybe not as kind as I could have been. I wasn't trying to be mean, but I was just like, really? Why are we surprised that it would go below the bottom? Why do I have to defend going down to 238 and below now at this point? Because really, this whole time we've been talking about the same thing, It's really not changed. And I say that because, again, I think there's kind of this stigma about a lot of folks, and I'm not saying that I'm not guilty of it at times, but there's definitely a stigma out there about people, and I hear it all the time where someone will come on and say, well, nobody knows what's going to happen on AMC. Nobody's right. They're always going to be wrong, and I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's true to a degree, but we have, because, I mean, nobody can be 100% right all the time. That's just silly. And frankly, the fact that we're right at all at different times is kind of phenomenal if you think about it. And it's not just guesswork. We're like actually doing the hard work of TA. I mean, so the fact that you can get these targets and they're right quite often is pretty good. But for me, I'm like, I don't really find that to be always the most fair, right? It's not really the most fair assessment. Like, there's certainly times I've been more right than other times, yeah. But, you know, on the bigger picture, conceptually, I think we've pretty much nailed it. I mean, we have. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I don't think it's really fair to say we didn't get it. This is from the Discord, and this is from October 10/31. So that's October, right? September, October, November, yeah. So it's Halloween. And at that point, we thought that it may come up at lowest. It hits, looks like 5, and then it could hit like right below 6 right here. We had 3 markers: 505, 548, 596. It ended up going to like 550s and then dropping. And a lot of people forget this because, again, I talked so heavily about 869 as the second motion, but it was there. I mean, there were targets that were really low, and we talked about problem areas. And it only went up to right there, and then it came down. It's pretty much exactly what it looked like. And then I suggested that by May, it could already be, this was, again, wrong, because later I changed it, but, and I did change it because I thought, well, it's taking a lot longer to build out, and this took a really long time, again, to come up. But this was the idea, that it would come down to like near the bottom here, bounce up to 4, and then come low. So, sue me that I'm not right about timing all the time. I'm a couple months off here. Really, it's only about a month off, if you think about it. Well, 2 months off. Sorry. Like 2 months is a long time, Booksy. My calls got burned. Yeah, I know. I'm aware that it's not pleasant to try to trade options on this. But the principle here of what happened, I mean, come on. Like give me a little bit of grace there. This is basically the same exact thing. So I need to defend myself every now and then. We've had people come on that say that I'm like never right and all this other stuff. I feel like that's really not very fair, when the bigger picture has always been pretty much the same. It has. So whether we get 330, whether we end up doing some kind of higher pop, I still think we're going to come down low. So this filing doesn't really change any of that. If it happens, then maybe it goes lower. I don't know. And if it doesn't happen and there's a shareholder meeting and the vote says no, which I think is a challenge now, because there's a lot of institutional trading going on, and they have a huge amount of shares, like 40 million or something. Vanguard does. I think it'd be pretty easy for them to try to vote it through. I think you're going to run into some issues, so there's always a possibility that it does go through. Maybe that's partially what drops it. I'm not sure. I think someone had mentioned it in the chat. Hang on, let me see. The timing for that news tells me everything I need to know. Downside is 100% pre-planned. Yeah, to some degree, I think you're right. I'm not trying to be lukewarm per se on that. I do agree with that, but the thing is that like that opens a huge can of worms that I'm not willing to open, because there's a lot that could be said about downside and upside here on AMC. And like, just like people say things like, well, this news was planned or this news was planned. It's like, yeah, but it kind of is just there when you need it. And sometimes I wonder, it does seem very like contrived, right? Like, oh, it's baked into it. And other times I wonder, if it hadn't happened, would you just have like this alternate path that still does the same thing, but does it in a different way, Like it ends up in the same place, but it does it in a different way. And that's kind of where I go with a lot of TA versus news, is that If the TA is set up that way, if the technicals are already telling you this is distribution, then you don't really have to ask the question, where's it going to go after? You just have to know where's it going to go before. Like you try to do your best. And that to me was always like the bedrock of this move, was that I don't really think it's ever going to go up again right after. And I had folks that would come on here and say, well, don't you think it's going to go to $6 or $7? And I'm like, no, not yet, because it hasn't made this back up and then it hasn't made a spring. And this is what this typically is. Again, timing was wrong, but the concept was correct. So it really makes no difference to me what news excuse there is. Pre-planned, not pre-planned, finding what they need to do. I don't know, And I don't know whether an operator has enough information to do that. They probably do, but part of me wonders if it really matters in the end. If you've kind of rightfully identified it, like we're talking about, like we were kind of already identifying it, it almost doesn't make any difference to me. So if we do believe that the end result is down, it's really more how do you get there? And the news will be there when it needs to be there. So yeah, that makes sense. July 18th keeps popping up too on my chart as a pivot. So I don't have this going up into July 18th, but you might be right about that, because if you look at where July 18th is now, I have it going down there, but if you look at where July 18th is now, it's actually on the intersection here of the hook and that downward creek. So you may be absolutely correct in that assessment. I don't have it right now on that marker, but you're 100% possibly correct right there, because you can see that motion would fit neatly in here and kind of, again, it could pop above slightly. That doesn't really matter. It could be like a wick. But ultimately, if it breaks down here, there you go. So then the question is, if it did something like that and it ran up into that date, what causes it to happen? Maybe that this chop is here with the tariff news. I don't know. That's coming up. That's next week. So Wednesday. I don't know. What do you guys think? I kind of think a lot of this is already baked in. I mean, frankly, we're basically back to where we were on April 2nd, which is at 274. So it's already kind of exactly where it was before. I mean, and last time it dropped a little and then rocketed up. So I could see something similar happening, I guess, where it's just sort of chopping here and then goes up after into a couple weeks and then kind of comes back down. I don't know about the rest of this. Like doing all this again would be kind of wonky. That'd be something for the history books. But it does kind of look like a repeat, doesn't it? Like timing between the announcement and earnings, and then the announcement being like right here in earnings. It's really similar. So it would be, I guess it wouldn't be super surprising if I was wrong and this ended up, I don't know how, but this ended up being like where it goes down. And it ends up being really late in September instead of August. I can only do this so many different ways, with timing. And the best wave timing that I found is usually farther out. And if someone asked about February, that's still there. But that's just one that to me I think it represents one of 2 points. It could be 3. And I know that by saying that, I'm opening a huge amount I'm opening Pandora's box, basically, a speculation. But usually if you find something that solid, and I've been finding it for a long time, I always say February 2026. It really boils down to whatever the March earnings is. So just keep that in mind. I know that I've been saying February, but remember, like AMC earnings is typically like the end of February. So like if we go back and we look at look at it. Like this is February 25th. I think the previous one was February like 28th or something like that. So when we say February, just get in your mind that we're talking about a pivot point. It could be a high intersection, yes. It could be the moment that it hits that high intersection. That's possible. But what seems to be more likely to me, as an opinion, is that that's probably more of a breakdown zone where you'd already be up there and then you'd be probably breaking down. That's my suggestion about it. It's not necessarily exactly what happens, but that's kind of the number two, is that it's actually a breakdown. You're already up high and it breaks down there. So that would be like you run up and you do a bunch of sideways garbage, and then you're actually in earnings. This is like February or March, going into March, you get like a up thrust or something, and then you drop. So it's not that it's at that time, it's by that time, which then asks the question, well, when does that happen? And I've been saying that I think you get a move in August, and then it chills out September, October, November, and then you get a second move in January. So it's like a 3-month period, which is similar to what we had in the big run up in 2020. But I've also talked about how those targets could be quite low. They might be unexpectedly low because there seems to be a skew on this setup. And if it sets up low on the first move, like around $6 to $7, that's probably where the breakout happens, because the creeks are really, really low now. And they're not way up there where they used to be if we had broken out earlier. So at this point, I think it's skewed, and it's possible that you don't even go past 20. And then that opens up a whole nother set of questions, but we're not going to deal with that right now. I'm just going to say that and leave it. For those that haven't heard that, don't panic, but that is a possibility. So basically, like, that's my speculative outcome. So sometime between August 6th and September 6th, you should have that move, the first one. And again, it's probably going to go to near at least up to $8 to $9, maybe up to 10 at the highest. And I think you're probably going to chill out here until February. That's my best guess. It could be way more violent than that. You could have a massive push all in one, but this is my estimation for what happens. There's a lot of other things here that we could talk about, but like in terms of like pullbacks, this doesn't look like it pulls back very far. Really, it could pull all the way back down to 4. If we don't make another high, that could end up being the creek that we back up to before it like reaccumulates. But the reaccumulation range to me seems to be most likely here because this has been set askew. It's like going to lay it up right there instead of higher. So all of that being said, what if it does take till, January to run, and it does some other garbage down bottom? And all this is now affecting what we now have to deal with long term. I don't know. That's a big question. That's the other thing that I don't really want to. That's the kind of the third option, which is it's a low pivot. And it's a strange one because it would sort of imply that you don't actually go anywhere until near January or February. So it's a low pivot. It doesn't make as much sense to me for a number of reasons. It's longer than 2 years for one, but also like at some point you kind of run out of room and it almost doesn't make sense. If the goal in laying it up is to accumulate at a certain rate, restart it. Let's see if that helps at all. It didn't really help. Oh well. So, point being, doesn't really matter if it goes up again. In some ways, down seems more likely, and you're talking about down into August, September, and then up potentially right then, and then building out going into probably January. Okay? So that's that. Winners this week. Apple's been a big winner. I'm happy that I was in Apple. I know some people didn't really want to play it. I get that. Talked about it yesterday. Just wanting to see that push up high. It has made the advancement. I'm going to watch it carefully today and tomorrow because if it slides back down and it is overbought on the 4 hour, that could mean that with the weakness that's been experienced thus far on Apple, that could mean that this is not good because if it just pushes up and then closes back below here, that could signal distributive action to come back down. So we got to be really careful. I don't really want to see it close back below like maybe 211. But for now, it's up quite a bit. My calls were happy this morning, and that burst in energy I think is good. I don't, again, want to see it kind of have a head fake here and then slide backwards. I think that'd be really bad. So if it closes beneath 211 and then ends up down here at 198, I'm going to be very kind of concerned, I guess, going into that July 9th deadline. I hadn't even looked at SPY today. It's up a little bit, 618. Still kind of cranking to the upside. XRP, I haven't talked about it much on the stream, but this is one that I actually entered when it came down low. And it's had some serious chops, so there's kind of a mixed bag. And I thought that it was going to break out and go a bit higher. It ultimately got pretty close to the target I was looking for. I was looking for like this 232. I was thinking about this. And it ended up hitting earlier a little higher. So it did come up to 232 eventually, way over here after a big pullback. So again, I've not really talked about XRP very much. And this is one that's a crypto. So if you're not interested in crypto, you might not want it or be interested in it. But on the big picture, I think it's got the potential here. There's been frequent times where this has hit low here around 192 and had some pretty decent rebounds. Most of the time it comes back to, when it hits that area, it comes back to about 240. I looked at this as a wave, and it seems like there's a good chance it's going to try to do that near 240. It's possible that it's got a lot of selling pressure as well. So it's possible it doesn't quite get there until way later, and it may take a while. It may even hit a new downward motion low at short term because this is a bit of a weakness. So it can't really drop significantly below 2 again without a likely fallout. So there's different things that could happen here. I didn't do all of the things that can happen. Really was just focusing on like, where do I think those pivots are? There was one here on the 30th. It did pop, didn't break out, and if it pops, and that's what happened, is like it pops up and then immediately comes down and makes a new low. That's typically not a good sign. Like there's some serious weakness there. There's a lot of sellers. There's a big sell wall up at 230. So right now it's really range bound between 2 and 230. I don't have a lot of huge confidence in this big picture. I think it's entirely possible this is like a large iterative cat ear. It looks very similar to me to like a small cat ear iteration here where it's playing out the big picture, almost like identical. If you look at the big picture right here versus what you see on the small, almost identical. So it would imply that there's likely going to be another drop. It may not be this severe. I guess in this case, I've got it going way down, but that seems unlikely. It should be more like this, where you have like another ear within the ear kind of deal. But I don't know exactly where it would be, but something like this. Probably going to end up being right on that line between the two, like right there. So it could come down pretty low. So anyways, if it drops back down to 2 again, it's likely going to have one more big pop, and this time hit like 240. So that's where everything seems to be going. It's heading into the end of July. So maybe not the best trade in the universe, but if it gets to that $2 marker again, I think you're in a good shape if you're interested in it. That's a decent trade. I don't really want to deal with Wolf too much. I'll talk about it if you're interested. IWM, which is your small caps, it's a mixed bag. I had some targets going up to about 220, which is really where we are And then I had a slightly higher target at like 225, which had more to do with this creek level right here. But it took a little longer to get there, not by much. In this case, it's only about a week or so, maybe a week, two off. But it come back up here, I think you're talking about 225 again. That's the February to January area. And this would be a place to have support. So if it can manage to hold this, I think you want to keep above 200, and your small caps might be in good shape. They have yet to recover back to all-time highs. They're really taking a beating, especially with the interest rates kind of remaining a bit high. The small caps are more affected by debt than the larger ones. So, and then I'll go through that again.